through the lens of outbound prospecting, the number one problem is not giving it enough time. And what I mean by that is there's been a huge influx of tools and process and unrealistic expectations and things like this, which lead people to be what I refer to as first round knockout artists. You do all this work, you get everything ready to go, you make a call, and what happens to you is what we know is going to happen. No, not interested, not now, take me off your list, so on. There's only a half a dozen or so things people are going to say to you, and people ignore that. And I would say that that kind of, to me, falls under, there's this plague or epidemic of people sharing what sounds good instead of really having enough experience to be able to share the truth with people.
Welcome back to the B2B Playbook, where we believe that great go-to-market is about people, not platforms. This episode is for anyone tired of outbound that feels like guesswork, because the truth is most sales teams are chasing meetings, but buyers aren't chasing you. The buyers aren't asking for more automation. They're not asking for more sequences. They're not asking for more fake personalization. They want relevance. They want to know that you actually understand them. So how do you give that to them? We've got Shawn Sease, also known as the Professor of Prospecting, and Adam Mandarovich, founder of CRO School and Closed Circuit Selling, with us today to really unpack why most outbound fails before it even starts, what advice is leading sales teams astray, how to make sales commercially viable, and how your sales teams can stop guessing and start earning real conversations. Shawn, thank you so much for joining us today.
You are welcome. It's my honor to be your guys' guest. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, no, an absolute pleasure. And Adam, thank you as always. Very, very good to see you.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate being here for this type of discussion to speak to what we believe in.
Fantastic. Well, Shawn, I want to kick off with you. You're known as the Professor of Prospecting. What do you find is the biggest misconception that people have when it comes to prospecting today?
I believe that if we look at it through the lens of outbound prospecting, is the number one problem is not giving it enough time. And what I mean by that is there's been a huge influx of tools and process and unrealistic expectations and things like this, which lead people to be what I refer to as first round knockout artists. You do all this work, you get everything ready to go, you make a call, and what happens to you is what we know is going to happen. No, not interested, not now, take me off your list, so on. There's only a half a dozen or so things people are going to say to you, and people ignore that. And I would say that that kind of, to me, falls under, there's this plague or epidemic of people sharing what sounds good instead of really having enough experience to be able to share the truth with people.
Adam, has that been your experience as well?
Yeah. I was just going to say, Shawn, just like while you're right there, do you feel that the explosion of the tools has also met the requirement of the people that have never been in the doing, that might have come from the other end, like sales ops or ops delivery, that now run these GDN teams, that now push all these tools, that then sell that as like the process, when they don't actually know how to validate the market or do the workshops to get the results from the market? Is that how you think, like, is that why we're here? Or is it just because the people that are running those agencies get enough attention online, people go with what they say, not what they can do?
Well, I think it's as simple as just people searching for the easy button. You know and it does. It may work. You could probably come up with a process for some people where it does work. But like I said, but my experience is that it just takes time, and there's unrealistic expectations about what really goes down during even first time connects or cold calls. But we say when we're doing discovery for our clients that we do outbound for, we push really hard on the fact that first time cold call connects and first time intro meetings, for that matter, are probably two of the worst performing human engagement metrics there are. You know, they're the toughest ones to get through, the toughest ones to get a next step going. And we sort of kind of see that people want to skip steps. They want it to be a linear process, right? I'll build a list, I'll call people, I'll get meetings, I'll do a discovery call, close deals, and I'll win. And it just doesn't work that way. And then when it doesn't work that way, what we do is what a lot of people do is they start looking for shortcuts because they want that process to work. And so, in our opinion, they're not actually looking at the problem, which means that, a real kind of superficial way to say it is that a lot of people don't have the stomach and the stamina for it. What we focus on is sharing with people that if you do give it enough time, and we actually have the data is pretty clear that if you actually take a list, you use call it validate, so on, actually get to know your market a little bit, you start having conversations with people, and you start doing follow-ups. You actually start curating for timing. What starts to happen, and this goes back to not giving it enough time, what I specifically mean is that our North Star for an outbound campaign would be you got to start. So maybe 30, 60, 90 days. Sales leadership, in our opinion, should give reps the room to actually curate the data in-house, to have conversations, to get their teeth kicked in, to hear the no's so that they can curate the data for when the timing is right. And whether that means you had a good conversation with someone and they're busy with other things, or they just said, hey, I'm not interested right now, thanks for calling. That becomes a persistence campaign and a nurturing and so on. What we find, what we see is that when we actually run campaigns out for 30 days, 6 months, or let's say 30 days, 90 days, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 36 months. And even speaking from my own experience as a salesperson working for people, I was always aiming for, I need meetings and opportunities to fall out of this funnel predictably every day. I can't show up every day and try to get new meetings from new lists. I have to continue to backfill my forward moving motions. And so what I'm trying to do is within the first, hour or two of cold calling or prospecting a day or following up on my list is to get one or two meetings from people who I've already talked to, where I'm intersecting with timing. And then I'll spend a little bit of time doing the good old fashioned cold calling where I know, depending on what I sell, who I sell it to, what the 5 or 6 or 7 outcomes are going to be, regardless of who I talk to. And I don't really put a lot of stock in the bluebirds. In other words, if I'm cold calling someone for the first time and they say, hey, Shawn, congratulations, look at you. You must have been a fly on the wall. We were just talking about this. Let's get you in here for a demo. I don't chalk that up to I'm a master cold caller. I chalk that up to a byproduct of showing up and doing the work every day, right? So my North Star metric would be eventually after 3 months, 6 months of being in an outbound role or a kind of a territory or assigned account list, motion, that after 3 or 6 months that I'm predictably getting meetings and next steps and opportunities that are moving through the funnel faster because I've qualified them to some extent and the timing is right and so on, while I'm backfilling that process for future ones down the road. And picking, or the numbers were going to be like, I want 80% of those meetings to come from follow-ups, and I'll take the 20% or less of the bluebirds. I'm fine with them, right? That's luck. I'd actually rather be lucky than good, really. But that's what I would say about that for sure.
That's a really, really interesting take, Shawn. And from the marketing lens, and as I said to you before the call, I'm primarily a marketer. I'm learning more and more about the sales world. We talk a lot about the 95-5 rule that the B2B Institute shares, which is, the rule that of your total market, only 5%, if you're lucky, and depends on your category, industry vertical, only 5% are actually looking to buy right now. The other 95% are out of market because they're not aware of the solution or because they're with an existing vendor or something like that and they're currently in contract. And so as marketers, we need to keep that in mind, that we can't just send marketing material to people that's asking them to buy now, because if you do that, then there's a good chance people aren't going to remember you because you're not forming any real kind of mental associations with those people, because you're just asking them to buy now rather than doing something helpful, creating a good experience for them. So when they do come in market, they're ready to buy from you right now. And from what I'm hearing, Shawn, it sounds like a lot of people are approaching outbound with the idea that this person should take this meeting, whether they're in market or not. Would that be fair to say? Is that also kind of where people are going wrong?
I would agree with that sentiment 100%. And I think that brings us to what we refer to as step skipping in outreach. And I mean that in the most simple, fundamental way. And I'll give you an example. I'll give you a really simple example. We've actually coached and trained reps who are struggling to start conversations. We have these little mantras or things we talk about, like in a cold call: start a two-way dialogue or live to talk another day. And we developed that just through, our own execution, as well as looking at, psychology and neuroscience and all the goodies. I don't want to get carried away on that because that gets a little fluffy. But the reality is that when you call up somebody who isn't expecting your call, they usually have like a negative visceral reaction to it. You're a cold caller. And that's why I say if we can't start a two-way dialogue, we need to get out of that call and live to talk another day. And there's really easy ways to do that. I mean, one of the examples that I use for people who are struggling is just say, hold on, what happened? Hold on. What happened to introducing yourself and just saying what your intentions are? And again, this is in direct contrast to the popular advice of leading with value and getting to the point, right? And what I mean, and so I'll see if I could tie all this together, is that when somebody receives a cold call, they usually are having a visceral kind of emotional reaction, like, how do I get out of here? Right? Which to me kind of means that you're probably talking to someone's subconscious. You're not actually talking to them. And then when you start pushing on value, hey, if you just stick around and I can tell you, what we do, I'm sure you're going to see it's important, like you were asking, George, forcing the meeting. Well, we kind of believe that there are probably 3 different communication styles out there. And this goes for anybody, not just cold calling. And just to boil them down, it would be, there are practical conversations, there are social conversations, and there are emotional conversations. And I would submit that first time cold call connects if the prospect is in an emotional state and they're trying to get out of the call and you're leading with value, you're having a practical discussion, you aren't communicating. It's not happening. It's not actually even happening. So our advice and what we ask reps to just try the first time to help them understand this is just say something a little bit more. Well, we always think of it as you've got to say something so that the prospect will respond, so that you'll get a cue. And that's what we're trying to do, is what is the cue from the prospect to do next, right? And one of the simplest ways we found to do that, it's always funny because people always say that doesn't work. And I always say, well, careful, try it. And so one of the simplest examples is, hey, Adam, it's Shawn over at I Never Answer, and hey, you're not expecting my call at all today. It's the first time I tried to reach you. You got half a minute, and I'll share with you what I'm up to today, or if I just caught you at the worst time possible. Now, that's a permission-based opener, which everyone says, don't do that. Well, we already shared earlier that my North Star is 80% of my meetings are going to come from follow-up. I'm actually trying to force that process, as opposed to being a first round knockout artist. So when somebody says, actually, I'm super busy, perfect. I got my cue. They're falling right into, I'm good to go because I have a process, right? Now, when somebody comes back and says, hey, sure, what's on your mind? Going back to helping reps do better in the very beginning, we might have them say, well, the purpose for my call today was to just let you know that I'm actually taking over your account and I'm actually going to be working to earn, the opportunity to earn your business in the next 30 days to 3 years. And I wanted to, see if today was a good enough time to start. Now, that's just a pure, that's an example of me trying to do what I want to do in a cold call, which is get the prospect to pursue me, So when I say something like that, the prospect will typically go, again, I don't want to get carried away and say it's a silver bullet. We get our share of people who hang up. Is this a cold call? Let's set that aside because there's no antidote to that, right? But we're trying to mitigate that a little bit and increase our conversion rates bit by bit, a little bit better every day. So when we just stop right there and the prospect says, well, what do you do? Boom. There, I'm in a two-way conversation and they're somewhat pursuing me. And my holy grail for pursuit really is when somebody's really pursuing me is when they show up to a scheduled call, right? If they show up to a scheduled meeting, they're putting skin in the game. And to me, that's when we'll probably be better seated or better situated for sharing secrets with each other, getting to the bottom of the things. Like the way we opened up our call today, some of the things that I said before we were recording, right? Build a little rapport, set the conditions where we can actually share secrets with each other, trust each other a little bit more. That's not happening in a cold call. And we find that leading with value and getting to the point kind of erodes that out of the gate. So again, I would even go back and say, I don't care if you use a PBO because to me, one big differentiator for me is that I'm a talent person. I like people and talent. I think that talent brings process together, brings process to life, not the other way around. I don't think you take a process and tell a rep, follow the process. That's usually when you have you're a tyrant, I'm a slave, and there's high churn there. It's a bad situation. So there was a lot in what I said there, and I'm only 7-9 seconds into the call. right? But what I did was I created the pursuit. I took the cold out of the call is how I would say it, right? So hey, what do you do? And then what do you do? The next question I would ask, again, in this baton passing rhythm of the conversation, we call it, let me ask you, have you even heard of my company? Are you familiar with INeverAnswer.com? Seen us on a billboard during the Super Bowl halftime show? Make a joke or whatever. No. Well, great. So now I know where to start. And then I'm going to come back with probably a compelling question. Or now we're getting deeper into what do the person I'm working with, or what do you sell? Who do you sell it to? Would determine what is the next thing that we would do there. It's not universal, right? It's going to apply to, and then of course the actual rep themselves. So I'll hand it back to you guys right there.
I mean, that's a refreshingly honest approach. Everything you kind of see, at least on LinkedIn, is all around different tricks and tactics, and probably a lot more like guessing at people's problems to open with, trying to really poke at pains from the very beginning. Whereas this kind of seems like you've flipped it around, Shawn, and you've got them asking you questions to begin with, which then sort of gives you permission to share a bit more and hopefully have a bit more context to do that in the right way. And I suppose, Shawn, would it be fair to say that if the meeting were just the goal from that first call, and if you had a huge list and you were just going to go through to the next person, then you would never bother doing that, right? Because you're just looking to hunt for those who want to buy from you right now. And if they're not the right person, we've got, 5,000 other people that we need to call, and we're going on to the next one.
Yeah. And again, one of the big things about the way that we train or coach or do campaigns for people, the criteria is, what do you sell? Who do you sell it to? How much does it cost? What's the buying cycle? What's the maturity of it? Do people know about it? And so on. So don't misunderstand me. In what I mean is that on the other side of the spectrum, if we do have some semblance of product market fit, which, by the way, there's nothing abstract about product market fit, right? If we said, it's a funny thing, though, because when you ask people, you kind of get the deer in the headlights. What's product market fit? I'm not saying my definition is correct, but I do refer to it as there's nothing abstract about it. It means that you can call people. You can get meetings that convert to whatever your next step is, whether it's an intro call, a demo, a discovery call, that convert to revenue, that actually go on to renew and expand. And then those referrals are a feedback loop to the top that help you get more top of funnel. That would be product market fit. Not a founder who says we've got the best thing since torn bread, or can't actually articulate the answer to the question of, hey, before we get carried away, Adam, in your own words, and take your time, who do you serve and how do you serve them? That's my number one discovery question for when people come to me for help. Prevailing answer, most popular answer, hey, when people find out what we do, they're going to want it. Okay. Besides the best thing since torn bread, can you, again, in your own words, tell me, who you serve and how you serve them? So my point is that if it is something where we can actually just put a script together. I mean, I'll give you a really good example of a script framework for you. Let's say you were selling sales tools to other people, which, by the way, we kind of have a moratorium on that. We don't do that, but since there are so many people that sell sales tools to other people, I'll give you a sample. Let's say you're selling dialing software, right? Dialing acceleration software. Name any one of the different platforms that are out there, right? It might sound, and I'll use the script that everyone hates, everyone likes to pick on, the PBO that everyone likes to pick up on, and then I'll explain to you why it works and why 5 people somewhere book 400 meetings a month using it right now as we speak, because I know who they are, and it's a fact. Hey, Adam, it's Shawn over at dialer platform. Yeah, 27 seconds, and I know I'm in interruption. You got 27 seconds. I'll tell you why I called. Role play with me, Adam.
Yeah. Sure, Shawn. Let's hear it.
Thanks. I appreciate it. We've actually built kind of a breakthrough technology that completely eliminates the waste and frustration that's preventing really good sales reps from using the phone effectively, or in the worst case, not at all. And the only reason why I called you today was to get some time on your calendar to show you how that works. How's this Friday at 3 before you wrap up for the weekend, or is that too pressing? Are we out into next week? Now, push back on
Shawn,
you.
can you tell me?
Yeah.
Yeah, can you tell me like a little bit more about it and how you actually do that? Because that's a wild claim.
Yeah, actually, Adam, I would have fell out of my chair if you said, let's book this. I would have actually had a couple of questions to make sure it's, really relevant and we don't waste each other's time. So, a quick question for you. Are you ready? Just a simple question. Are you guys focused mostly on inbound? I mean, are you letting your reps get away with not actually doing outbound, or are you guys actually trying to use outbound to go and enter different markets and dominate in your category? Are you going outbound?
Mm. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we certainly are, Sean. Yeah, yeah.
Perfect. So my dialing platform it's a technology platform that allows reps like me to have conversations with decision makers like you, one after the other. As a matter of fact, I started this call block about 25 minutes ago. You're the ninth decision maker that I've talked to in the last 20 minutes. Just to give me an idea of where you guys are, how many conversations per hour, or if it's easier, knowing how things go,
Mm.
how many conversations per day are your reps having? You know?
Oh, look, I think that the really good ones might have 3 in an hour if we're lucky with our connect rates. And yeah, extrapolated over, if I can make them actually do their call blocks for like 3.5 hours a day, we're lucky. Because I find that they fiddle around on the internet trying to do research instead of actually trying to dial the numbers. Because they
Yeah.
feel disingenuous in terms of how they can actually get connected with the right people. And that forces bad behaviors for them not to get into live conversations and put it off at all costs.
Yeah. So if I heard what you said about the number, it's like 3 to 4. Not as many conversations per day as you would like, I think is what you said, right? It could be more. More would be better.
Hmm.
Right. Perfect. Well, like
Hmm.
I said, that was the only reason why I called today, was to actually get some time on the calendar to share with you how this technology works. And Adam, for now, that's it. I can share with you that even if you decide not to pursue it any further than our next call, one, you're going to walk away with some insights that you can use to compare to what you're doing already, maybe some ideas you can
Hmm.
implement as well, and then we'll remain a valuable resource for you in the future. Or better yet, if it makes sense, we'll get you set up for your team to use the platform for a day, and we will prove it. So what do you say? You got some time on Friday afternoon? Or if that's a little too pressing, how are we out in the next week? Or maybe now we're kind of creeping up on the end of June here. Would it make more sense to do it after the 4th of July, or are you going to be in that week before the 4th of July? You got your calendar handy?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. If you can send that across now, I can give you a reply. That'll be great.
Yeah. So let's stop the role play there, and I'll just share with you that framework was like this. It was the permission based opener, which was straight and to the point, straight up. The second thing I did was what we call a nebulous statement, where we're trying to include kind of an economic, a strategic, and emotional component. And George, I actually saw your visceral reaction to when I said we've built a breakthrough that eliminates the waste, the frustration, you know, that prevents really great reps from using the phone effectively, or in the worst case, not at all. That's my nebulous statement. Like, I'm saying something because I want someone to say, hold on, man. Like Adam said, hold on. I heard what you said, but can say it again, right? And
Mhm.
this is me creating the conditions of a two-way dialogue, where I'm actually creating a two-way dialogue. And when you said, good, I'm glad you did that, Adam, because when in my script, right? I'm glad you said that. I would have fallen off my chair if you said, let's book this meeting, because it would have been too good to be true. I got a question for you anyways. And then I asked, hey, are you guys actually doing outbound? And that's me sincerely trying to verify that I should continue. Because if you go, no, we would hear from people, no, we're crushing it with inbound, so we don't even bother. It's like, man, I wish I had your job. You hiring, right? You hiring?
Yeah.
I'll come work for you, right? And then so we asked that, what we call there. So there's a nebulous statement to get them to lean in again, and causing another micro pursuit, right? Trying to, you're pursuing me, pursue me. That's what I want, pursuit. And then we ask the compelling question, which is to me a little bit of gathering information, verifying that our target list is good to go, and I would exit the call if it was nowhere to go here. And then I'm actually going to make good on my what we call an expansion statement by clarifying in plain English how we do what I said in the nebulous statement, right? And then my
Mhm.
close, I developed that over years, and I just use it like clockwork on everything. I say it all the time, which is, and that's it. I could share with you that even and again, this is another one when you see people saying all the time, it's got to be what's in it for them. Make it what's in it for them. And that's one of the frustrating things about advice on LinkedIn, is that it's really easy to say what doesn't work. You see the post, stop doing this. You're like, okay, thank you very much. Any tips on what I should do? Got anything you want to share? And that's where we kind of worked on the what's in it for me thing, and that's what we call the what's in it for me close, which anyone can use it. Hey, Adam, that's it. Even if you decide not to pursue this any further than our next call, you're going to walk away with some insights and a framework you can use to assess and compare against your current situation, and will remain a valuable resource for you in the future. So what do you say? How's Friday at 3? I mean, literally making it, it's not even about my product or whatever. It's about you maybe becoming the next best version of yourself at your job for now, because if I get you in that intro meeting, you're going to fall in love with me anyways, because who doesn't love me? You know, like if I get you in that meeting, we're going to get to the bottom of it, and you're going to be a customer or not. We're going to walk away happy that we met each other for sure,
So it sounds like that there's an exchange of value then, Shawn. It sounds like there's also information gathering on your behalf. So you can do this process more on the buyer's terms as well.
My apologies for interrupting. I just wanted to circle back to the fact to what I was saying, that there are scripts that are designed to get straight to the point for product market fit situations. If you're an early stage startup and people don't know about you, or it's innovation or whatever, there's going to be a different script framework for that. It might be, hey, the purpose for my call is to get time on your calendar, but before we do that and we waste each other's time, I have 2 or 3 quick questions for you. It'll only take 30 seconds and I'll get you back to doing what you're doing. And we're going to go into probably 3 close-ended questions that are multiple choice, where we're looking for things that we can do. And all we're trying to do is capitalize on the fact that we know that cold calls only last like a minute or a minute and a half when there's nothing to do with somebody. And that we call that script the 3 Q&A, 3 questions and an answer. And what we're using that for is to gather information, validate, see if there's anything we can fork in the road and maybe take to a next step, or just say, hey, appreciate it. Sounds like it's not relevant right now. We'll keep in touch over, 90-day, whatever, So that, I just wanted to make that point, that script was not a holy grail for everyone. It depends what you sell, who you sell it to, where you are, who your reps are, et cetera, et cetera. There's so many different variables, and there's probably 3 or 4 different script frameworks that we use to actually execute on that. With at the very top, when we talk to people who are actually doing something that's transactional, in other words, it costs like $50 a month or $200 a month, it solves some point solution, something, it's PLG. You probably can't even afford to book meetings, right? The best case would be, hey, we have a solution to this problem and we want to prove it. So can we show you? We want to prove it. And if you're not into let's let you prove it, I can't afford to stay here with you anyways. So I got to move fast. A good example of that would be, we did a campaign. I'll try to do this fast because I have my time. Was website reputation management. A guy called and said, we got a great solution. We can get rid of bad reviews in 5 days. I just need more meetings because I can close them. I said, no, why don't we just, since we can get that data easy, it was a no-brainer, right? We'll scrape websites that have bad reviews. And then we'll call up people and say, hey, I saw you've got bad reviews here. I can get rid of them, 2 of them for you in 5 days. And all I need is a meeting after that to give you a pitch to sign you up for that. Can we do that? I'm paraphrasing, of course, right? And people said, yes, we started doing it. They started closing deals. So we actually, when the client came to us and wanted meetings because they've been listening to LinkedIn, said, no, you don't. What do you want meetings for? How can you afford to have meetings? What are you talking about, man? People either want the reviews gone or not. Let's get rid of a couple of them and get them signed up. So again, that's a spectrum of from one side to the other. So I'll hand it back now. Thanks, Jets.
Yeah. I was just going to say that's what Shawn has gone through there is one high end of the market with a category that's defined, and that will work, right? If your goal is the meeting. But the other end of the market, which is what Shawn mostly speaks to, is building out through conversations to get your market validation. And that's a lot what we talk to, George, with how we validate the market, which we call cataloging, where we'll define whether they've got X, Y, Z in place already, what that looks like, what they like, what they don't like, if they'd be willing to look at what's better, if they're in a fixed term contract. But the magic of that conversation that we find, Shawn, and I probably didn't explain this to you properly 4 years ago, so I'm sorry. I probably kept that little piece under my hood because I literally thought if I spoke about it online, people would steal it. But now I talk about it all the time. George convinced me, but people still think it's not obvious. If you lead with thinking that they've already got a supplier in place, asking what they like, what they don't, asking if they're in a fixed term contract, what it would take to look like, what it would take for them to look at an alternative in what time frame, that gives you the magic to then go and stop marketing from doing their meaningless mass MQLs. Because I can literally just walk that over on a template to marketing and say, can you build this out? They're going to want to look at this 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. George's team will then build that out, 6 weeks before. Our business development team then go back and go, hey guys, we had a conversation. We're looking at doing this, this, and this. Here's what we've put together for you. Does this make sense for us to talk about the opportunity? That then rebuilds what sales and marketing was in your and my day, Shawn, prior to all this predictable revenue, fugazi push towards the meeting because everyone's got product market fit and we can shove everyone to meetings. But what the downstream repercussions that people don't talk about on LinkedIn is they don't understand the commercial disconnect that actually causes marketing to be not marketers. They're literally just plastering the market to feed the beast, to give the sales team more leads that are never going to close in the first place, which caused the dysfunction between sales and marketing that we see at market. So if we just wind back to like 2008, which is around when I think you and I were on the phone, right? What did we do different? We walked that information, we validated the market, which is one of your proper steps. We walked that back over to the other team in a manila folder. And I literally just had like handwritten or photocopies of fax paper, man. And I'm like, hey, mister, like they're going to come in market in 3 months. Can we build this out roughly? You allocate resources underneath you in the communications team and the graphic team it would have been. Could you build this out for me about 6 weeks before? I'll get my teams to go back to these guys and say we've got something to show them. Then we've got something to show them with value. We've got permission to circle back. Everyone's happy. And we actually diced up the revenue that became an open opportunity between sales and marketing, and there wasn't a commercial disconnect. So sorry, that's a big explanation, but I just wanted to explain what you're saying and what we're doing are the same thing, but in a different way, because we're leading with trying to push them, as you said, into two-way dialogue, but with permission and rapport relationship into it. Whether they've got that defined or not, we can find out and then use that as market validation to use that to get to the right tool in terms of right timing, right channel, right offer, right time. But that actually closes the gap in what sales and marketing should be doing. But yeah, as you said, it's very easy to find the wrong advice on LinkedIn, but not very often you see the right.
Yeah. I would expand on that in the context of what we do, because I focus on outbound cold calling, is what I focus on. So we have this thing that we call the big three of B2B. It's very simple. We use it for modernization and rip and replace place, right? Where you're going in and you're trying to replace existing solutions. Like you decided to build something and it's just a matter, you're not trying to bake a pie, you're trying to take a bigger slice of the pie that's already there, right? The big three to B2B would be, who do you currently use? Which would be, are you paying someone to do it? Are you doing it in-house? How long have you been doing it that way? Which is, when does the contract renew if you're using somebody else? And how many users? How big is it? How many departments? Whatever. And for a lot of rip and replace or modernization plays, you can take the edge off of your cold callers by saying, hey, for cold calls, and this would be marketing, saying, hey, do us a favor and find out. If I just update the database with who they use, when the contract ends, we'll nurture the hell out of them from there. And then now when the buying window opens, what they do, and then all the caller has to do is run a 90-day persistence campaign, which to me introduces all of the cardinal sins of modern selling, which would be following up and checking in. Because when I follow up on 90-day persistence campaigns, I call up and validate what I already know. Hey, Adam, it's Shawn. And I want him to remember me. So I'm always trying to do stuff like even what I did when we started our call today with some of the things I said. I want you to remember me. I'm going to refer back to something so it reminds you, and we're building this rapport and trust. But I'm always going to open up with, me, I told you I was going to call you every 90 days. Just wanted to see, if you're still in background checks, just calling to see if you're still using Hire Right and they're doing a good job, or did you guys, they really, shit the bed and it's time to throw them out the window? No, Shawn, the car, it's still good. Nothing new's happening here. No worries, no problem. How, what's going on? How was your weekend? Or what are you doing next weekend? Like it's summertime. You got any vacations planned? Anyone getting married, whatever. I'm looking for, going back to the three conversation styles, practical, emotional, and social. I might go from my practical conversation style to social. Hey, any of the kids graduating, grandkids, whatever? I want to know something. So when I call again, I can continue to build rapport in the trust dimension, right? Not just business all the time. I'm not going to, hey, I got this article that you should read, or whatever. That, again, I don't mean to make fun of anyone who does that. It slips out of me because that doesn't appeal to me, and it might be a style thing. I don't really care when someone says, oh, hey, I saw this thing you would like. Like, whatever next. That's not on my mind. I'm not a big fan of that value leaving thing. Lead with value. I like to build relationships and get to know people. And like I said, I'm a people person. So going back to what I said, the big three of B2B, and going back to, I always say, make it easy on callers, and you'll make it easy on the prospects. So if you call up and say to someone, hey, I just been assigned your account. I'd be shocked if you didn't already have a background check company that you've been working with for years. Shut up. Yeah, we are. One I'm familiar with, Sterling, Hire Right, one of the popular ones, or a local guy. Yeah, it's Sterling. Great. How long have you been using them? When is it? Don't tell me I haven't been doing my job and you renewed last month. You're in a 3-year contract. Nah, I think we've had it for a couple of years. Great. How many background checks you guys doing? About 10,000 a month, probably, something like that. Yeah, somewhere around there. Perfect. That's what I need to know. You got any questions for me over here at Free Employee? No? Great. Well, I'm going to be following up with you every 60, 90 days to see if you ever want to throw them out the window or they make a mistake or whatever until it's time for you guys to go out and, do your due diligence on a new bid or whatever, So thanks a lot. Appreciate the time today. Next. And I'm going to do that to the next one and the next one. And and as far as I could tell, like what Adam's saying is that I'm probably working in lockstep with marketing because they can take that information and start using it to do really cool stuff. Maybe we're going to do webinars on whatever, that I can follow up and invite them to a webinar or whatever. We're going to use that day instead of me calling up and saying, hey, we could save you time and money on your background checks. Oh, well, good for you. Bye. Don't ever call me again. Click. Cool.
Yep.
Yeah.
So what I love about that, sorry, George, if you had a question, but just quickly, what I love about that is we've gone so far into just selling the kitchen sink in the first instance, but Shawn is ideally explaining what we do, George, and what we've built is trust relevance, but better than that, acting as an account manager for an account you don't yet have allows you to then lower the barrier to entry, right? So it's easy. It's like, imagine back in the day when you're in customer success, calling accounts you've already got is piss easy, right? Hey, George, I just wanted to make sure you've got this, this, and this. How does that sound? Would you like to see Sally on Tuesday? That is an easier entry. So if you treat outbound the same way, buy into these categories that you're defining, you market validate, and then you take that to marketing, you've then got a pretty high chance you're going to get to the table. But even then, you're going to disqualify as quickly as the ones that are never going to be in market or play it forward to those like Shawn that do it slightly different to us. But what I will say is this, I'll close out with this question, Shawn, if I could. You're very unique in the way that you go about it, and you're very similar to how we do it in our different defined stages, right? Mm-hmm. But why do you think the market collectively pushes against both of our methods that are quite similar? We just use different brackets and collection tools. Is it because they have a mass misunderstanding, or they're still guided by the broken sales methodologies, or they're not old enough to remember what it should look like, or they've not actually come from sales and don't know how to do it?
Yeah. Going back to, did they forget how to do it, or going back in time? When you were saying what you were saying, I can remember back in the early 90s, I'm 54 now, and I started selling when I was pretty young. And I remember I grew up in the Bay Area, in the Silicon Valley, and the marketing team would put ads in magazines, and then we would get these stacks of what they call bingo cards, right? Then because people would fill out the card and send it in, right? And then we get the leads and we'd call them and we would sell them stuff. And man, if we could go back to that, if we could go back to that, that would be great. That would be so great, but we're not there. Honestly, Adam, know what the answer to your question is, because part of me really believes that there are a whole bunch of companies that are actually doing really well, that do it good. I mean, there's companies that are just so far out of the scope that I do. I'm just a little guy helping founders and startups get off the ground. I make a good living and things like that. I've worked for larger companies. I've worked for a company that went from 8 million to 300 million in 8 years, and I was there. I'm not saying I did it. I had a territory and so on, and I did my part, and they did it through mergers and acquisitions. But what I can say is that at that org and every other org that I was at where I stayed and it was successful, honestly, the salespeople were all complete and total assassins. Like, they hired and fired fast. And so there were processes and things you had to follow, like, there were metrics you had to do and so on. But for the most part, you went out and you hunted, right? And then you were supported with other materials. The president would show up if you needed him. It was a group of salespeople and great marketers, not some tyrant at the top who's trying to build a process and making people, like I said, you're the slave, you're the tyrant, I'm the slave kind of thing. So sometimes I think that what you're talking about could be reserved to a bubble on LinkedIn, and I don't know what the answer is because it's frustrating as hell to me. And I don't really have a. I wish I did. I'm going to stop there because I'm going to keep saying the same thing. I wish I had an astute answer to that. One thing I do know is that a lot of times when people come to us for help with outbound, they spend a lot of money somewhere else and they didn't get very far. And I think that they were falling for what sounds good again. And I don't know. I don't know why. I wish I could fix it for everybody, but I can't. I think that some people still think that I'm crazy too. So I swear I wish I had a better answer, but that's a tough
No.
one, man. That's a tough one. And I don't want to pretend like I'm something I'm not, you know. Yeah.
Okay, so let's wind back to that experience where you've described to me that those salespeople were assassins. What they
Hmm.
were measured on was revenue, right?
Yeah.
So here's my experience. I literally wrote this just before we came online, so I'll just read this out to you because you'll have a
Hmm.
laugh. For 25 years, I've
Hmm.
run revenue teams across every terrain that you can name: high fashion, fitness, boiler rooms, big finance, employee benefits, taxation, workplace national supply contracts, marketing, legal, and FMO infrastructures. What the one thing that they all had in common is they were measured on market validations to opportunities. None of them were measured on the ones that went rogue and actually got the deals. I mean, they might have been measured on meetings, but what they did to get the revenue was they validated the market first, and then they went back to those people with what they had to show them. Every single
Yeah.
one of them. So
Hmm.
it's interesting that it seems like in our LinkedIn echo chamber bubble, it's only really you and I talking about it, doing it this way, and the rest of the market is doing everything they possibly can to put tools and tech in the place of hypotheticals. Those guys might run 30, 60, 100K a month for 2, 3 months, and then they realize they don't actually know what they're doing. And that seems to be like a consistent churn because, like, as you
Hmm.
said, it's like hypothetical what sounds good, not what works. And that all comes back to the pillar of market validation, right? So if they don't have that, they don't have a foundation to build anything on. So yeah, I just thought I'd close out and validate exactly what you said.
Yeah.
When salespeople have rope to run rogue, the first thing they do if they have a brain is they validate the market first. That gives you right channel, right account, right contact, right timing, right offer. It just seems like we're in this weird fugazi that how on earth did we get here where that is questioned, where it should be commercial common sense? So yeah, I just thought
Yeah.
I'd
No. Yeah. No.
validate
No.
exactly what you said.
I agree. And I think that you probably heard me make reference to the SDR BDR industrial complex. And I would even take that further and say, I would even say, basically the sales tools industrial complex. And I kind of
Mm-hmm.
coined that phrase, I don't know, I shouldn't say I coined it. I've heard other people say it. It doesn't matter because it comes from the military industrial complex, right? Where the idea is that quietly somebody is making war to keep the war machine going, to keep the money
Yes.
machine going, right? And then, so like Gartner and all these guys, like the Gartner Hype Cycle and all these guys, these consultants and so on, when they say something's going this way, then they validate these tools, right? But there's no proof. And another example of that is the idea that people are 67 or 73% through their buying journey before they reach out to somebody. Now I've been hearing that for a decade now, right? All along, all these tools coming out, which means that, hey, you need all these tools so that you can manage that. And I ever since I first heard that, I kept thinking, how come every time I call up people from a cold call and I ask people if they've heard of this company or whatever, they say no. No, I've never heard of you. Whatever. It doesn't seem like they're out doing a whole lot of research. And then when I actually talk to them about it, they're interesting. Let's talk about that. And so I kind of started to believe that maybe I'm the one. Maybe I'm one of the people who's actually, creating the intent or creating that people have done
Mm-hmm.
research and know something. And then, like intent, for example, like waiting to strike in what George referred to as, the 3% or 5% who's in market or whatever, you know, again, going back in history and dating myself, if you ever have an experience with RFPs, selling to the government or whatever, request for proposals, if you're a savvy salesperson, you're there early putting what do you call them?
Mm-hmm.
Blockouts in the RFP, right?
Yeah.
So when it goes out to RFP, you pretty much you knew somebody, you sold the deal. Very slim chance you're going to lose it unless somebody who blindsided you, that you didn't know about, but you could do that, right? If you just responded to the RFP, you might win one in. It's not even worth doing it. It's not even worth doing it. It's not even worth filling them out because somebody else has already locked you out. And to me, that would be outbound, getting there early, knocking on doors, shaking people's hands, and getting there early. Yet the sales tools, or even worse, the SDR BDR industrial complex, because they get to manage to metrics that don't matter at all, like dial to connect, and they're making up all kinds of things now: activations, completions, meetings. Like, there's only 4 outcomes, boys and girls. Yes, no, not me, not now. We don't need to color it. But when you start selling people little gadgets and things, you probably have to add deliverables on that outside of the scope of revenue, because if you don't convert to revenue, you got to come up with a reason to pay for the tool. And the SDR BDR industrial complex has done a really good job of making people believe if you build it, they will come. And I don't know, if you look at the tenure of sales reps and stuff, it's 3 months, 6 months, or people who are talking about how to do it, and they've had 11 roles in the last 10 years, or not 10 years, excuse me, 11 roles in the last 3 years. I don't think so. There's 2 things going on there: either poor rep at a bad org, or a good rep at a bad org, or a combination of both. I don't know, but it doesn't look good. And then quota attainment is down. So one last thought there too is that another confounding variable here is that there seems, because of this tools epidemic, there seems to be a lot of nice to haves. I see stuff all the time that I'm like, how that doesn't sound useful to me. Like, why would you? We already know that. Like, okay, cool. Now we see that on a dashboard. Now what? Cool. What now? It doesn't solve anything worth solving. It's like, what do you call it? It's a nice to have, right? It's a nice to have. And I think that creeps in and causes people a lot of problems too. I think that's going to get worse with AI, isn't it? With being able to just knock out these guys vibe coding or whatever they call it. Yeah.
But I think, it comes down to like funny money ramps and where that comes from, that are also have self-interest in the tools that are pushing that market, right? So until we can come together and push where that's measured to upstream, whether that's in the venture capital world, private equity, or group CEOs globally, if the measurement doesn't change from meeting set and it goes back to market validations, we won't have this problem. But you're going to have a whole lot of organizations that don't know how to do what you and I are talking about, and there'll be a high demand. But I think that's where it needs to go. But until maybe self-interest from the tools that are funding some of the measurements from this whole cycle change. But maybe that's going to change now with the changes to iOS, because they won't be able to just spam the shit out of people and hope for the best. Hopefully that's what happens. But I don't know if you've heard a lot of mine and George's other stuff in Australia. We never were able to use spam cannons, because you can't spam 1/3 of your market. That's literally 10 million people where we live, right? So that's imagine if you lived in Texas and 1/3 of the people knew you're a dickhead because all you did is spam people. You couldn't walk down the street and go, Shawn. We couldn't do that. So we literally had to lead with, selling an account for an account we don't yet have, building that rapport relationship, coming back at the right time with the right offer on the right channel with the right person, as well as using upstream commercialization stuff like RFPs, but using that downstream to win the deals, at a lower end, knowing you needed to be in the right place, right time, bring marketing on the journey, lead into customer success. This is what it looks like to work with us, Shawn, etc. But that's not how the market sells. And that seems like all of that has been washed out of the market, except for you and I pushing against both, against that pretty heavily. Maybe, hopefully it pushes back to that now with the changes.
Yeah. It's a fun exercise too. I get a kick out of the discovery calls I get to do with founders, and I could always tell when I'm actually going to win a deal. Or I always think when I'm talking to people about the work that we do and they want help with outbound and so on, as soon as I hear a founder or a sales leader or whatever say, I never thought of it that way. That's what I'm looking for. That's what I'm looking for in a discovery call. It's interesting. That makes a lot of sense. I never thought of it that way. And then you can see the light bulb go off, and they're like, "Yeah, I think we want to move forward. I think we want to do this." And again, that to me would be so. I don't care if we do business together or not. You know what I mean? I don't care. I hope we do good business together. Another thing too, real quick, to sales and marketing and the silos and things. I don't know why, but for my whole entire career, I think somebody must have said it to me when I was younger, because I had a chance to work with some smart people who said these one-liners when I was like in my 20s that I've never forgotten. And one guy, he was a mathematician. He had a PhD in math, or a PhD in physics and a master's degree in math from Cornell. He's a software developer. Started his own company after working at IBM and working on the first run of the ATM machines back in the 50s or 60s or whatever. Had a chance to work for him when I was in high school. He taught me how to write code. And this was in the late 80s. And he told me one time, he said, "There's no difference between," and this is, we can say revenue. So there isn't any difference between marketing and sales. I don't know why there is. We're all trying to make revenue. And then he and I talked about that and we developed it. Of course, they do different things, but that stuck with me and that served me well. And so the whole marketing and sales silo thing has never been. And when I say it on LinkedIn, like, I can't tell the whole backstory in a comment, but I'm like, I've always thought that sales and marketing is the same thing. And then people come back right away and go, "No, they're not. If you don't know they're different, then you don't know what you're talking about." Okay, that's cool. Okay.
I was I was I was taught the
Okay.
same thing, Sean. I was taught exactly the same thing. I was taught the same thing, but not only that, it's more like we have to validate the market first, give marketing what they need to succeed so we can all win.
Yeah.
That just seems like a core pillar that no
hmm
one has.
Yeah. And I think to the step skipping stuff, right? And I think that to me is the one little pervasive thing that people are in such a hurry going after what George was saying, the 3 to 5% market. But sorry about that, George. Go ahead. You got a burning desire there. Let's hear it.
No. I was just saying, like, I've kind of
I know.
felt I've come to the same realization that marketing and sales, like, we are absolutely on the same team. Marketing happens to be very good at like one to many and one to few communication, speaking to a lot of people, speaking to a few at one point in time. And sales is excellent at the one-to-one stuff. And you put a marketer and try and get them on the phone, they're terrified of doing that. And probably given enough training and reps, they would be okay. But yeah, like, we should be saying very similar things. Just marketing is good at doing that on a one to many, a one to few basis, and sales is excellent at doing that at the one to one. And what I've really learned from Adam and yourself, Shawn, is that a lot of this needs to start from market validation as that opening piece. As a marketer, we've always talked about like customer research, do customer research, interview your best customers, find out what's important to them. That's still really important to inform your marketing messaging and everything. But there's no substitute for getting that information on an account level. And that motion needs to start with sales validating the market first. Because then also I've learned from Adam too, that if you start collecting information like who you're currently using, when's your contract up, how many seats do you use, all of a sudden your motion as a whole is a lot more commercially viable because you're not trying to push these people through a funnel that were either going to churn at customer success, were never going to be a great fit for your product, or you're going to be upside down on the deal because the resources you spent in acquiring them as a customer is never going to pay for itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we've seen that as well, Sean. In our last run from CRO school, we had one of the marketers say how much they'd spend trying to crack open an account before that the account was actually validated, right? And they had the realization, hang on, we should just get sales to validate the market first and then tell us what we need to succeed and then just attach those people. So yeah, it was a bit of it was pretty inspirational for them to have that realization in the aha moment. Yeah, so I think for that, right?
Yeah, I think too. One of the other, I think we're probably saying the same thing. We're aligned on so many things here, but one other thought on this whole thing is that the premature deployment of things seems to me as an issue too. Like people just adding SDRs because we need pipeline, right? And I'm over here thinking, hold on, I just want to ask people, hold on, are your AEs are just at least within 80% or 90% of quota for a few quarters in a row? And they're like, no, they're actually struggling. That's why we want SDRs. Whoa, wait, what do you mean? You mean the full cycle role can't perform and you want to split it off and specialize and you haven't even figured out, like, hold on, wait a second. But my point to get rid of the drama, but the dramatic effect of it is that would be the premature deployment of the SDR role. And at this point, I would question, like, if your reps are within quota or close to quota, the question should be, does it make more sense to hire another AE and give them a territory and keep doing what's working? because the SDR role, as far as I can tell, as much as I've worked in it for the last 8 years since I transitioned from my own selling, history and owning businesses to doing lead gen, I learned in a hurry that, man, if you don't have a bottomless pit of cash, the SDR role is going to bleed you dry. It seems to me that that's the case. Somebody can correct me, and that would go all the way back to predictable revenue, right? I mean, if you're Salesforce and you're drowning in cash, what do you care? Hire a bunch of nitwits to go out and bug the hell out of people, or who cares? But if you don't, well, you need somebody in there who can, like I said, is gonna take the process or whatever you do, bring it to life with their talent and get it done. And then the question shouldn't be, boy, our aim is to eventually have an SDR team. I would say, how do we avoid that? How do we not do that? How do we, why would we do that? Right. And I think that's another one of those things that just become a wholesale accepted. Even the first team that I joined, I was the third hire at a lead gen company, called the Sales Developers back in 2017 with Ryan Reisert and Rex Biebertson. And he and I have since gone our separate ways, whatever. But when I joined that team, I took over all the calling just to I was helping them build it. We were going to hire callers. And out of the gate, so forget about the people, let's just talk about the business. They were immediately trying to hire SDRs to book meetings for the AEs of the company and have customer success roles. And then we had an SDR team that was booking meetings for the clients that were doing it. And I was thinking the whole entire time I was fighting it, going, how come the AEs don't just do their own prospecting and manage the accounts? It's not that big of a deal. We only have 30 clients, but these young guys were hell-bent on installing the specialization of roles. And as far as I can tell, I was there, I saw it with my own eyes, they wanted to be a SaaS company. And if you had SDRs and AEs and customer success people, and you are now an official SaaS company. And I've never understood that. And honestly, I think I'm correct. That company went out of business. It went out of business for a couple of different reasons. But I see that all the time too. We must have SDRs. You're like, why? Prove it. Tell me why. And if your AEs are not performing, I would say get yourself some new AEs, because especially today, right? There's no shortage of sales reps, probably really good ones, or actually you might not even have to be that good. The will to do the work goes a long way. The will to show up and grind, because it's a get your teeth kicked in, life sucking, soul killing role, sales. And that's another thing, is there's nothing glamorous about it at all. Just like we were talking about the golf swing, right? Like I maybe a 18, 19 handicapper, but man, when I'm on, I love it. When I'm off, take me home. Don't want to be here, but all I need is that one good shot. What do you guys think about that? Like the premature deployment of both specialization of roles, and then because once you do that, right, Adam and George, once you do that, here comes the SDR or the sales tools complex. In order for modern SDRs to succeed, you need to have this 21-piece tech stack. Otherwise, don't even bother. You're like, what? Now I've taken one role. I've got 2 people I have to manage, double the cost, all these tools, and what? You're going to have a bottomless pit of cash. It's, I don't understand it. It might be the limits of me intellectually or whatever, but I don't get it. I don't understand it.
Before Adam jumps in, I just want to share what happens to marketing under that model, Shawn, is as soon as you have that SDR AE split, marketing just gets reduced to a lead generation function, because we just got to feed the beast, which means that we don't get to do any stuff that marketing's actually good at, which is making sure people understand the brand, making sure sales are really well supported, creating really positive experiences. Because while we might have a great intent to do that, and marketers know, and we see this in our programs as well, marketers know that lead generation is not really just real marketing. If you're measured on MQLs and they're your KPIs, then that's the activity that you're going to revert to. So what I've learned as well is marketing's actions are actually dictated by the methodology that sales uses to go to market. And then that is dictated kind of by whoever sits above them and says this is how we're going to measure sales. So it kind of starts from the top down, goes to sales, and how sales go to market really affects marketing. And it's a nightmare for a marketer. It's really, really terrible.
That sounds like it's backwards, right? It's backwards, right?
Totally. Completely backwards. And it doesn't allow either function to do what they should be doing, or really what they're good at, or play to their strengths.
I can just hang it up now, Shawn, because now, like all that stuff I said in 2020 about top-down targeting and how the measurements actually cause the commercial disconnect and sales methodologies have actually pushed commercial failure, I'm not crazy anymore.
Yeah.
It should be obvious.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you something. One of the things that we have changed in the last 2 years about the way we do meeting setting or cold calling for people is we pretty much push people towards group discovery. Because in what I mean by that is you could call it webinars or roundtables or whatever, but when early stage startups and things like that, when nobody knows about you, we changed the whole entire narrative to, hey, Adam and George, probably about 20 or 25 people just like you are going to get together and talk about the highs and lows of what's going on, et cetera, et cetera. And we'd love to have you there because we want to hear what's going on with you. We want to learn from each other. And we call that a Trojan horse opportunity. We're running that play for founders now. And the interesting thing just for us, is me, a little sales pitch here of my own, is that here's the funny thing, right? In the work that we do, if we book 20 meetings for a founder or whoever, a company in a month, let's just say there's, 4 weeks, 5 days each. So a meeting a day, which would be pretty solid. That'd be pretty good. But 50% of them show. Our client starts to manage our process. Hey, this isn't working. People aren't showing up. It's wasting my time. The meetings that do show up, they're not converting. Why? Because the founder sucks at selling. Long story short, right?
Yep.
This was another problem I decided to solve. Like, how do we keep clients? Because they don't stick around. They won't stay the course. We can't get them to do the follow-up thing because they want quick wins. And so what we did was we switched it to this roundtable thing. It made the narrative easier for the callers. And what's interesting is we get, in a 3 or 4 week period, if we get 50 people registered and 25 people show up, nobody complains about the show rate. We follow up with those guys. And then the people who show up and actually interact in the thing, they go on, a couple of them go on to be customers, or they one-to-one meetings go on that are way more interactive or qualified as opposed to the one-to-one meeting setting. And that's been working really well. And again, there's nothing new there. That would be doing webinars and so on and so forth. But we were just kind of come up with, what am I trying to say? As an agency, we were trying to solve a real problem, which was how do we get more out of first-time connects? And then how do we increase the speed to, you guessed it, revenue, revenue, revenue. So when people say how many meetings do you guarantee? You're all, well, we don't. There's plenty of other agencies will, but how are you on revenue? Would you rather have revenue, or would you rather increase your speed to revenue, or do you want more meetings? Well, of course we want revenue. Okay, well, let's make that our North Star. Check this out. And
So
that's just an example of trying to point at or take a look at these bottlenecks and try to actually solve that problem for people, and that seems to be working.
What's really awesome about what you said there, Shawn, is back when you and I first had some discussions, I was trying to explain to Scott Martinez and maybe even Justin Michael back then, commercial access is that selling into groups that you create that have that problem or the category defined, right? They laughed me out of the room. So I said this like 5 years ago, the first time I said it actively on LinkedIn, and people were like, what do you mean by commercial access? Well, it's selling into one too many of the people that have your problem. So all I really did is think about where I could build a town hall or a group presentation for multiple employers in one place, sell the room as a quoting session, and then ask them how many of those would like the commercial deal pack to go to customer success and settlement. Like it was basic. Yeah, people just don't think that way. But like that's super interesting to me that you've gone, like that's what you're now having success with, because that's what I was saying and doing too. And I'd had massive success across Australia and New Zealand doing the same thing. What's interesting is you can also take the same process with B2C, but find where that group exists, ask for permission to the gatekeeper, and then have like groups of 10,000 people that have that problem by asking access to the one that actually gives you the access to the group, right? And then you've got reciprocal access and buyers that are always going to buy from that process. But again, I know that I wrote a paper on it. You probably supported me because you understood. But most people back then used to laugh, George, most people used to laugh at the stuff I said on LinkedIn, man.
Yeah, people do all the time. People do all the time. They're jerks. Yeah.
Yeah. Sales 101 now seems to be like the market is catching up to all the crazy stuff that Shawn and I used to say. But yeah, I'm thankful, Shawn, for us having the lens the ability, the spiritual and operational awareness that we have. And yeah, I love everything you've said, man, because yeah, that's where it all needs to get back to. How we're going to get there. We probably also need to dismantle the big four because they're still pushing the sales methodologies, but that's probably a whole nother episode. So
yeah, for sure. And then I think that the bottom line is that it's hard. It's hard. Sales and marketing is hard. Like, so, and I always say, let's start there. Like, this isn't going to be easy, and there are no guarantees. And we may damn well shit the bed, and those statistics are available, right? I mean, they're not as gross as everyone says they are, but the 60 to 50% failure rate over 5 years or whatever, that kind of thing. Like, it's tough to start up a business and make it. It's hard. It's hard. And so people who run around saying, "Oh man, you're doing it wrong," like, shut up, stupid. Shut up, stupid. You got to show up and do the work. You got to show up and take your knocks. And again, be paying attention and solve for these things. Find things that work. All these little micro things, little micro moments. Like I said, that well, think of micro pursuit. If I can in the first 10 or 15 seconds to get somebody to say, "Wait a second, say that again. What did you say? Say that again." Okay, I love to, because I was ready for that. I thought you might say that because of what I said before. Things like that. Like, that's how it works. And if they hang up, well, to me, that's not a signal that to me, that's a signal that I caught them at a bad time, and I have enough experience to know when I call them next week, they might say, "Hey, what's up, man? Love the sound of your voice. What's up?" Like, you never know. You never know. You just got to keep going. Got to keep going.
Well, it sounds like that's a recurring theme here, is that there's no shortcuts. You have to do the work. You have to find out for yourself. And Shawn, thank you for sharing so much with us here today.
My pleasure.
And
My
online
pleasure.
on LinkedIn as well. I've really, really enjoyed following your content. I just feel like you're very honest with what you say. It's very clear that you have a very honest approach. It's clear that it's built on, a lot of experience. And so thank you so much for joining us. Before we round out the conversation, Shawn, is there anything else that you wanted to share? Any other topic that you wanted us to close out on?
No, the only thing I would share again, but maybe just a little marketing stuff on mine, is that my side is that recently, over the last month and a half, I added to my Monday mornings, and this is just a little bit about me. Like, when I don't like something, I figure out a way to do it. I'll give you an example. Like, in the summertime or in the wintertime, when the sun is low on the horizon, the sun's low on the horizon, I have blue eyes and it makes me sneeze. And then I hate the wind. Like, when it's windy and it's sunny out, can't stand it. So what I did was I decided to start flying kites. So I bought kites. Now I go out when it's windy and the sun, I can fly my kites and it makes me happy. I hate Mondays. Where I'm going with this is I hate Monday mornings, and I just don't like them. And so I decided to start doing part 1 of my cold calling and messaging workshop for free on Monday mornings, and it's on my LinkedIn. I take 20 people at a time every Monday and walk them through kind of an abridged version of my 3-part cold calling messaging workshop as a way to go, hey, I need to take the whole thing, and then they sign up for the real one. So if anyone wants to join me on Monday mornings for free to talk more about how you could do cold calling better for who you serve and how they serve them, I would love to see you on a Monday morning at the cold calling and messaging workshop. It's on my LinkedIn page.
That's an amazing opportunity. I encourage everyone listening or viewing, definitely go and check it out. Shawn Sease, INeverAnswer.com. Thank you so much for your time. People, please connect with them on LinkedIn. Go and attend the Monday morning session. It's going to be packed with value. Really appreciate your time, Shawn. And thank you, Adam, so much for joining us.
No, thank you guys for the space to talk about what we believe in. I think that the final note is you can't have revenue alignment architecture if it doesn't start with market validation.
Yeah, and then my last words would be, if you do not give outbound enough time, you will always run out of time.
Love it. Adam, Shawn, thank you so much for your time.
Cheers, everyone.